Hi, this is Lawan. Sorry for my voice. I lost it over the weekend. Hopefully, we will continue. This week, I'm bringing to you an election update, Bidenomics and why the term Vibecession doesn't adequately address voters' qualms with the economy, and an investigation into the deaths of 12 hostages killed by Israeli tank fire and what the China-US fentanyl task force might mean for US complicity in the repression against Uyghurs. The Democratic primaries in Nevada will be happening today. Biden is expected to win without much contest. The last poll for the Nevada Democratic primaries showed Biden beating the next candidate, Marianne Williamson, by 75 points. However, Nevada may prove to be difficult for Biden to win in the general elections. The latest poll concluded on January 21st showed Trump beating Biden in the swing state by 8 percentage points. The Republican primary in Nevada will take place on Thursday, where Trump is expected to beat Nikki Haley by a similar margin. On Monday, the Haley campaign criticized the Nevada caucuses as being rigged for Trump. Haley's campaign manager, Betsy Ankney, told reporters in a call, quote, "In terms of Nevada, we have not spent a dime nor an ounce of energy on Nevada. We made the decision early on that we were not going to pay $55,000 to a Trump entity to participate in a process that was rigged for Trump." The next major primary happens on February 24th, where Nikki Haley will compete with Trump in her home state of South Carolina. The most recent polling we have available shows Trump beating Haley by 26 percentage points. Although Biden will probably win all of the early Democratic primaries by a large margin, national polling for the general election shows Trump beating Biden from anywhere between 4 to 8 percentage points. Although a recent civics poll sponsored by a partisan Democratic Party organization, shows even support for Biden and Trump, and a YouGov poll gave Biden a slight 1-point lead. Biden's approval rating has been in decline. According to 538, 38.6% of Americans approve of Joe Biden. That puts Biden's approval rating at this point in his presidency lower than the past 9 presidents going back to Richard Nixon. That's also lower than Trump's approval rating in February of 2020, where he was polling at around 43%. Biden's approval rating rests roughly at the same level as Trump's after the January 6th insurrection in 2021. Right now, Trump's favorability is also on a slow rise. 42.9% of Americans view Trump favorably. Experts blame lackluster support for Biden on voters' perception of the economy. An NBC News poll conducted from January 26th to January 30th asked respondents if Donald Trump or Joe Biden would be better for America's economy. The poll also showed that Trump beat Biden by 16 points on being competent and effective, and by 30 points on handling the border and immigration. Experts explain that Biden's low approval rating is likely a lingering after effect of the massive inflation in the U.S. In June of 2022, inflation reached 9.1%, the highest it's been in 40 years. As American economic conditions improved through 2023, economy experts and journalists adopted the term Vibecession from Kyla Scanlon, a former options trader who makes TikToks about economics. The term began as a way of describing low consumer sentiment, even as economic indicators suggest that the state of the economy is improving. Here's a clip of Scanlon explaining her term.
Published a piece in the Financial Times today called "Is the Vibecession Really Over?" And the Vibecession is this idea that there's a temporary decline in sentiment despite the economic data feeling relatively okay. There's a lot of things to be excited about in the economy right now. Consumer sentiment is on the rise. The Federal Reserve seems to be relatively okay with where the economy is headed, even though in their meeting minutes today they were like, we're a little bit worried about inflation. Growth is still high, inflation is cooling, the labor market is pretty strong, real wages are increasing. But things still don't feel good, right? Student loan payments are starting back up, inequality is rising, homelessness is on the rise again, and of course the strength in the economy could mean that the Fed continues to raise rates, which could put further pressure on the economy moving forward. Of course, it's really difficult because sentiment and data can diverge so much. Because we have so many different data points heading us in so many different directions, it's really hard to figure out exactly what's going on. So at the end of the piece, I talk about how we're missing a big national goal. I think that, and this sounds silly, but like in order to have better vibes, we have to tell better stories. Actually, on the fiscal level, talking about why reshoring could potentially help people, why Bidenomics, for however you feel about Biden, is actually quite good. Overall, it seems like the vibes are improving and we've avoided a recession for now. But of course, There's nuance to everything.
Increasingly, the term Vibecession is being used in a political context to explain voters' perceptions of the economy under Biden. For example, Paul Krugman, the New York Times macroeconomic writer, recently published an opinion article titled, "Is the Vibecession Finally Coming to an End?" In the article, Krugman acknowledges that while, quote, the economy remains riddled with inequality and injustice, right now, quote, it's looking a lot better, with real wages rising and inequality falling. Krugman pointed to the Michigan Index, a measure of consumer sentiment in the economy, which rose sharply in December of 2023 and January of this year. In the short run, Krugman is spot on. Inflation has cooled down significantly, and consumer sentiment seems to be on the rise. But put into the context of the past 40 years, things are slightly different. The Gini coefficient, an indicator of income inequality, has risen steadily since 1980. There was a sharp dip in 2020, which might have been due to the stimulus checks and child tax credits issued in response to the COVID pandemic. Other indicators show that the American economy for the past 20 years has been a pressure cooker for the middle class. According to information from the U.S. Census and from the St. Louis Federal Reserve Bank, since 2000, median home price has grown by approximately 423%, while median income has grown by only 216%. This indicates a growing affordability gap, making it increasingly difficult for Americans to purchase homes. In short, if you grew up in a middle or working class household in America, it is getting harder to own a house and attain the same quality of life your parents had. Of course, these figures have nothing to do with Bidenomics or the American economy under Trump. This is a trend that has continued over the course of several presidencies, including both Democrats and Republicans. It does show, however, that using the term Vibecession to describe voters' disapproval of the economy under Biden doesn't fully address the scale of the issue, nor does talking about the economy exclusively in terms of the 2024 election cycle. Just because inflation has slowed and there is no looming threat of a recession doesn't mean that the economy, as it is currently structured, is working for Americans. The likelihood is also that no candidate from either major party will present a real solution to this problem that has been growing steadily for more than 20 years. This may, however, be Trump's edge over Biden. Trump's 2016 slogan, "Make America Great Again," at least puts words to the feelings of voters who see themselves struggling to attain the same cultural milestones as their parents. Another factor responsible for the tepid support for Biden is continued backing for Israel's war in Gaza. Polls have shown that 61% of likely voters would support a U.S. call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. 49% of Republican voters support a ceasefire, a plurality, and for Democrat voters, that number is 76%. So the question looms, if a majority of the voters that elected Biden in 2020 support a ceasefire, and if it has significant support among Republican voters, why doesn't he call for one? The war in Gaza has been brutal, and the conduct of the Israeli Defense Force is questionable. Haaretz, an Israeli publication, published early this morning that the IDF will launch an investigation into an incident in Kibbutz Be'eri on October 7th, when a high-ranking IDF officer ordered a tank to fire on a house where Hamas fighters held 14 hostages. Brigadier General Barak Hirem told the New York Times that after the Hamas fighters fired a rocket at an Israeli tank, he ordered the tanks to, quote, break in, even at the cost of civilian casualties. 2 of 14 hostages in the house survived, one of whom had escaped to Be'eri from the Nova Music Festival. This incident may serve as an example of the application of the Hannibal Doctrine. This is a controversial protocol used by the Israeli military that allows for it to endanger the life of a soldier, or in this case civilians, to prevent them from being kidnapped. Officially, the Hannibal Directive was abandoned in 2016. In this instance, however, it appears that it may have been applied to Israeli citizens, some of whom were children. Some have also suggested that the Hannibal Directive is the tip of an iceberg of the IDF's disregard for civilian life. An internal Israeli report published by the New York Times early this morning revealed that the IDF estimates that a fifth of the remaining 136 hostages held by Hamas in Gaza have died. That's without mentioning the civilian death toll of the Israeli military campaign in Gaza. The Gaza Health Ministry says that almost 27,500 people have been killed. 70% of those killed in the conflict have been women and children. The UN estimates that since the start of the war, 100,000 people in Gaza have been killed, wounded, or are missing. It's possible that the Hannibal Directive remains unofficially in place, or that it is tolerated in the Israeli military. The results of the investigation into Brigadier General Barak's conduct may prove telling of the extent to which the Hannibal Directive has been truly abandoned. And finally, this week in China-US relations, on January 1st, a group of American college students flew to China to recreate the tour taken by the US ping pong team in 1971. The US table tennis players were the first Americans granted entry into China since the Communist Party took power in 1949, and the tour signaled the beginnings of a thaw in the US-China relationship and what became known as ping pong diplomacy. The symbolism is clear. The two countries are committed to a gradual thaw in their relationship, which reached a low in early 2023 when a Chinese spy balloon was sighted crossing the US. The American college students on tour in China serve, symbolically, to strengthen the people-to-people ties that the two countries aim to foster in this new, more competitive phase in their relationship. The Biden administration has also announced collaboration with China on the formation of a counter-narcotics task force. This task force is aimed at staunching the flow of fentanyl and fentanyl precursors from China into the US. Details on the task force's exact approach to curbing the flow of fentanyl remains unclear, but it runs the risk of increasing the US's complicity in China's state repression of Uyghurs. In China, popular and state perception view the country's Muslim minorities as drug pushers. This can be seen in an anti-drug PSA published by the Xinjiang authorities, where a Uyghur man plays a drug dealer that preys on Han Chinese women. Here's the clip. Although Biden and officials from his administration have spoken out on their concerns for China's human rights violations, America has assisted China in their repression of Uyghurs before. From 2003 to 2014, the US detained 22 Uyghurs in Guantanamo Bay under suspicion of terrorism. Incidentally, the People's Republic has explained some of its internment of Uyghurs in Xinjiang on the same grounds, as part of its efforts in the global war on terror. Is there no other space for the two countries to collaborate? Thank you so much for watching. This is Lao Wan. This is 华尔街前线. Hope to see you guys all next week.